Please welcome Walter Cronkite. Good evening.
Hey, this isn't bad. Can I stay?
Oh, you like show business.
Mr. Cronkite, on Johnny Carson the other night, you seemed a little surprised by the overwhelming attention the audience gave you. Does it shock you, the fact that so many adore you?
Oh, no, not shocking, but it's awfully pleasant, I must say. You know, particularly after not having been on daily news for 9 years now. It's a long time. It's amazing. It's a whole half a generation, practically. I was very pleased with that reception, obviously.
Why do you think that is? Even young people who weren't watching you on the news.
Patsy, I have the slightest idea. I don't spend much time examining my own navel. I don't really know what that might be from, really. I've always, in doing the broadcast and in my life, I've tried to be me. I have never tried to be anything else. I've never taken any diction lessons, obviously, or elocution lessons, or performance lessons of any kind. Never been an actor. I've just tried to communicate as best I can what I consider to be the important news of the day, and that's doing my job. And if that's the kind of happy rub-off, why, I'm delighted.
You retired very young from daily CBS News.
Oh, I made the decision a long time before that I was going to step down from the daily journalism, mostly to just, quite frankly, to have more time to myself. That is a terribly demanding job, not just the daily program, but also being the sort of lead broadcaster for the network. It meant that every time a story broke, you were there, which was, of course, the name of the game. That's where I wanted to be. You had to study constantly to doing the space shots when we were having a lot of those, and they were all covered live. I spent a lot of time at Cape Kennedy now, or Cape Canaveral, I guess it is again. And then, of course, politics, covering the elections and conventions. That took a great deal of time. So it was really a very demanding job. Is a demanding job. So I worked my way up to retirement. Unfortunately, I find it more demanding than the job. People ask me to do a lot of interesting things, and they're being interesting. I can't help but say yes. And like these books, that was just really more out of personal interest than any particularly huge revenue out of them. But Patsy is taken now to standing over me when the phone rings, and she mouths the word no and shakes her head violently and tries to shake me off, because I really bite off more than I can chew.
What do you miss, if anything, about
I miss
the
the daily flow of news. After almost 50 years of that, it was 40 years when I stepped down, I guess. But you get used to having that teleprinter clacking in your ear and the breaking story and assigning forces and editing and writing. That's a very exciting business, and it's kind of hard to let go of that. I'd expected it to be difficult, and it hasn't been any more difficult than I anticipated, actually, perhaps a little less.
You accompanied Richard Nixon to the Middle East in 1974. Your thoughts on what's happening there now, and how do you think the historians are going to reflect on this period of time?
Well, I think that the Middle East is such a complex political problem. The emotions are so high. The nature of Muslim fundamentalism is so foreign to our concept of politics and cultural values and social values and so forth. Very difficult for us to understand the people and to get along with those people. Their rivalries between themselves are so great They have never succeeded themselves in any kind of a meaningful alliance. I think for us to depend on an alliance with them is foolhardy, and I think we're getting in much deeper than good, prudent operation demands. And I'm just fearful that we're there for a long time of very, very difficult circumstances, and probably some loss of life. Whether it's how great the loss of life is depends on what the nature of the combat is. We might not have a full-fledged war and still lose a lot of people over a period of time through the various kinds of violence and terrorism that those people can perpetrate.
Mr. Cronkite, you have lent your time and commitment to encouraging people to support the survival of free over-the-air radio and television. Why?
Because it's a major source of information, for one thing. Second of all, it's a major source of entertainment for the people. Can be provided with no cost to them. I can't see why in the world you would want to change it. The logic simply says, why fiddle with something that works? If you want to put something alongside of it where you pay, as long as it does not interfere with the flow of programming, why obviously that's possible in a free society, but don't supplant free television and radio with something else by government edict or any other reason.
Tell us about your love of sailing and your new book.
Well, I found sailing about 30 years ago or a little more when I was racing automobiles and my small children were beginning to grow up and demanding some attention, and I realized it wasn't exactly a family sport. So I was sort of looking around for something else, and very serendipitously at the place we were summering in a lodge up north of New York City, they were doing some small boat, very small boat sailing on a very small pond. I got involved in that and never looked back. It captured my imagination immediately. I'm kind of a Walter Mitty. Every time I get on the boat, I think I'm taking a load of tea to Southampton, or I'm out to meet the pirates off the shores of the Spanish Main. This thing satisfies that kind of urge in me. I like being captain of my own ship. I think I'm a pretty good one. I'm incredibly calm, despite the fact I'm not under normal circumstances. Somehow or other at sea, command seems to invest me with particularly strong characteristics, which probably is what I like as well. The book, I'm glad you asked. The book is West Wind, done with a superb artist named Ray Ellis, internationally recognized. He's had a couple of very successful shows overseas. This is the third, really. It turned out to be a trilogy. Wasn't planned that way. Our first book was South by Southeast on the southeast coast of the United States, then North by Northeast, northeast coast of the United States. And this book, West Wind, covering the entire western coast from San Juan Islands down to actually Ensenada, Mexico, in a sense. The books are books of paintings. They're art books. I just do the text. They're really Ray Ellis's books. Beautiful, beautiful paintings, 90 to 100 paintings in the books of the coastal areas on land as well as from sea. Ray travels these areas. I, of course, sail them. We don't do that together. We sometimes join forces, but usually he does his book, he paints, and I do my book, and then we kind of at the conjunction say, well, here's a painting I ought to cover somehow or other in the writing, and here's something that I think is particularly important that perhaps you could do a little painting on. And this is the way the book comes together.
One final question. When will we get to read your autobiography?
Just as soon as I write it. And I think that might be sometime in the next year or so. I'm working on it.
Any final comments?
Meanwhile, don't forget to buy West Wind. You can get it at your local bookstore. Thank you, Patsy.
Thank you.
Wonderful, right.